Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, August 15th, 2019, and today we're going to be looking at a 2020 governor election prediction, pretty much coinciding with the 2020 Senate elections, 2020 House elections, 2020 presidential election, though this one is pretty much covered the least. Governor elections typically aren't forefront of the campaigns, even back in 2018 when we had about 34, 36 seats up, or 34, I think it was 34 seats up for, an election or re-election for some of the governors there. Back in 2018, it still wasn't a pretty notable thing to look at. But we have a census year coming up, 2020, which means that these Democrats or Republicans in office will be essentially guiding the way to draw the, map for the 2020 census. Which means that gerrymandering definitely can take place depending on who is in office. For example, North Carolina has a Democratic governor. It looks like if he gets reelected, North Carolina may look a little bit better for Democrats on the House level. Same thing for Republicans in areas. Let's say a Republican wins in North Carolina. It may seem that North Carolina might get redistricted even more in favor of the GOP. Really, the governor does have a pretty large presence, and also they pretty much manage everything that goes on with their state, thus the position of governor. And they don't really make up a national composition. They do have the National Governors Association, which has some influence, but it isn't anything like a Senate or House. They don't really vote on national type things because they are very specific to their own state. They do make up national numbers, obviously, with majorities, but they aren't as important as the Senate and House elections in terms of party composition. Though back in 2018, the composition went from a supermajority for the GOP down, I believe, to 27 to 23, if I'm not mistaken. But we have this map up with 18 Democrats and 18 Republicans. Now, there aren't 14 governor races in 2020. We actually are including Louisiana, Mississippi, and Kentucky. And the only reason why we are doing that is because those states are 2019 elections. They have not occurred yet. It's August 15th, 2019, which means that these elections will occur in November. They will not be on this map following that date, but it's on here just because these elections have not occurred yet, so we still need to cover them real quick. So we have Mississippi, Louisiana, and Kentucky, pretty much solid Republican states on the presidential level, pretty much on the Senate level, but the governor level, not so much. We actually have contested elections in all three of them, Kentucky the least, and Louisiana probably the most. Now, Mississippi does have some interesting candidates, actually in favor of the Democratic Party that are realistically winning candidates. We also have an incumbent Democrat from Louisiana who has a real shot at winning there as well. Kentucky probably has the least amount of, the smallest shot for the Democrats to pick up that seat there. But still, all three of these seats actually have good news for Democrats compared to previous elections or what you would expect from any three states such as these. So Mississippi, Louisiana, and Kentucky. I'm going to briefly touch them over real quick. Kentucky, I would say, still goes to the GOP. Mississippi narrowly lands in the GOP column, and then I'm going to give Louisiana to the Democrats. That's pretty much how the current composition is right now in terms of a party in favor. But we will see at the end of 2019. I did not put too much attention to this one because this video is purely about 2020. I'm actually in the middle of doing a 2020 overall election night. Now, what that means is I will have the presidential level. The nominee will be Joe Biden because I always pick the top Democratic polling nominee just for, because that's the number one candidate, the front runner, and of course Donald Trump. And then we have the 2020 Senate elections and then the 2020 governor elections. I will not be including the House elections just because that would be overwhelming, and also the video, I don't want it to be like 45 minutes long. So I'm pretty much only going to be including the Senate, governor, and presidential elections, of course, and that's going to be in one election night. The theme will be a CNN theme, may have a different type intro, we'll see. But I've spent 4 minutes talking to you guys about that purely. Let's just go ahead and focus on these 2020 elections. Now, on the right of your screen, we have safe and, toss-up ratings, safe through toss-up from Cook, Insider Elections, and Sabato Crystal Ball. So we have three different not necessarily polling firms, election firms that have rated these races already. Now, we have the Cook PVI here, we have the incumbents here, and many of them are running for re-election, the last race margin, and then, of course, the rating, as I mentioned before. So we do have some safe states that we really do not need to cover, states like Delaware. We have John Carney in here. Delaware goes to the Democrats, puts them at 20, tying with the Republicans. Another safe Republican state, I would say, is probably Missouri. We're probably not going to see much action there, to be completely honest with you. Same thing with Indiana. Eric Holcomb, he it seemed like back in 2016 that this seat was actually going to go to the Democratic Party, with Mike Pence retiring, actually not necessarily retiring, but going on to the Trump presidential election campaign. It looked like Indiana was actually going to go to the Democratic Party. The polling favored it. The actual 538 rating favored it as well, which was interesting to me. And it was rated as a lean Democratic seat. It ended up going for Eric Holcomb by around 5-6%. Obviously narrower than the presidential election, but still went to the GOP. Regardless, safe Republican seat as of 2020. North Dakota, another safe Republican seat, and also the state of Utah. Now, North Dakota, we don't have much information there, but Utah has a retiring incumbent right now. But I believe Mitt Romney's son has recently discussed running for governor in the state of Utah. I'm pretty sure the lieutenant governor or somewhere high up on the state level is running for the governor election, but Utah goes in the safe Republican column, putting the Republicans at 24. So they are officially one away from tying the majority. Again, this isn't too important. It's not like it makes or breaks, I guess, passing bills or things like that. But it is pretty interesting to look at. Keep in mind the Republicans started today off with 27 seats, the Democrats at 23. Right now the Democrats are at 20 and the Republicans are at 24. Again, 6 toss-up seats. Another safe, I guess, Democratic seat would be the state of Washington. That one we're probably not going to see too much action from, and it's going to really narrow down what we actually see here. Now, the state of West Virginia is rated safe Republican, but I am not going to characterize it as such. Jim Justice switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party after being elected as a Democrat. He got 49.1% of the vote in the past and has since switched to the Republican Party. I genuinely believe that he is going to have a strong primary opponent. This man was elected as a Democrat, and everyone expected him to stay the same. He switched to the GOP back, I think, in 2017, early 2018. I remember seeing it at a Trump rally, but that was not too monumental for the, I guess, GOP. It just added one number to their, I guess, governor's seat. They were already at 33 plus. So it really didn't matter that this one was going to the GOP, but I do think that there is a very strong primary opponent. And if that actually happens, we could see a real close race. Let's say Richard Ojeda runs here, or whatever. We could see a close race in the West Virginia governor race. But as of right now, I'm going to rate it as a likely, not likely Democrat, likely Republican seat, and that puts the Republicans at 25. So when keeping that in mind, the state of West Virginia puts the Republicans right at 25, one away from retaining the majority. Again, not too important, but just something to point out. So the Democrats are at 21. Toss-up is for 25 Republicans. So that leaves New Hampshire, Vermont, North Carolina, Montana, and I think we may be... Actually, no, that's it. So those 4 states, those are going to be the most covered governor races, most likely. And the thing is, Vermont and New Hampshire are pretty much both likely Republican seats, which means the Republican Party is probably going to hold on to their numbers, if not expand in 2020, which doesn't necessarily look too good for the Democratic Party, considering that they typically do pretty well in House, Senate, and governor elections when it comes down to the presidential election years, even if they do lose the presidential election. For example, back in 2016, the Democratic Party picked up 6 House seats, 2 Senate seats, but lost the presidential election 306 to 232 to President Trump. So the Republicans are at 25. What's interesting is that New Hampshire and Vermont are more Republican than North Carolina and Montana, even though Montana and North Carolina went to Trump back in 2016, and New Hampshire and Vermont went to Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and probably will end up the same way, just with a Democratic candidate instead of Hillary Clinton. But the thing is, both of these candidates run for re-election every 2 years, and Chris Sununu, I believe, is actually running for re-election in the state of New Hampshire. We can actually check right here. Yes, Chris Sununu is an announced candidate, but there is some discussion about Sununu running for Senate, which may be interesting. But if that does happen, we could actually see a very close governor election. That means a popular incumbent will no longer be in the running. He'll be running for Senate, sure, which could put the New Hampshire Senate race at risk, moving it from safe down to lean Democrat. But if that actually does happen, New Hampshire could actually move out of its likely characterization. So I'm actually going to characterize New Hampshire as a lean state. I do think that it is going to get close. But Vermont, I'm still still comfortable putting it in the likely Republican column. That's just how I think it's going to end up. And if we look back in 2018, that's also the same characterization that we saw in the past. So that puts the Republicans right at the number they were at before. And now it's up to North Carolina and Montana to decide whether or not the Democratic Party loses seats. Now, Montana, we have a toss-up characterization from all 3 firms. And the reason for that is Steve Bullock is term limited. We have a pretty popular Democrat who is now term limited, cannot run for re-election in Montana, But the thing is, there is a speculation that a former Montana governor, I believe, was elected back in 2005, according to his bio, or 2006, left office in 2012. And if he does a run for this election, he actually could possibly win. Let's actually take a look at some of the announced candidates. I think there's only Greg Gianforte is one. If that man wins the Republican primary, it is not a good look for the Republican Party there. We have Mike. Let me see, actually. Let me scroll down and read actually about these people here, because it actually explains what they are. So they have a former Democratic governor who may run again. They have the lieutenant governor is a potential candidate. These people essentially, they are, I guess, speculative candidates, which means Chris Sununu might not have actually announced that he's running. So actually, he did not announce that he's running for re-election. It's pretty much assumed. I don't think he's going to risk running against Jean Shaheen just because, yes, he'd be going for a higher office, but I don't think he would actually beat her. But we could see whatever happens. But Montana, if let's say the lieutenant governor or the former Democratic governor, I still see that one as a toss-up. I actually see this one as a lean, tilt Democratic seat just for right now, just because of the strong tier of Democratic candidates that could possibly run and probably are going to run. I mean, there's no other Democrat that could actually win there. But Montana, I would put in the tilt Democratic column, and North Carolina, surprisingly, I would actually put in the lean Democratic column. I do think that Governor Roy Cooper is going to win re-election. He actually is doing pretty well against the other announced candidate. Let's see. Dan Forest, who is the current lieutenant governor. So the way that North Carolina elections work, it's a little bit interesting. They have a governor election ballot, and then they have a lieutenant governor ballot, which means that a Democrat can win on the governor level, and then a lieutenant governor can be a Republican. That's exactly what happened back in 2016. Roy Cooper won on the governor level, but then his lieutenant governor ended up being a Republican. The actual incumbent lieutenant governor, who was working with the governor who lost to Roy Cooper. So a little bit of bad blood there, and it looks like it's going to come out this election. Dan Forest is running against Roy Cooper, the lieutenant governor versus governor, which is pretty interesting. It reminds me back in 1790s time when there was a president, and then the second place candidate became vice president, and then they ended up running against each other again. So that pretty much wraps up this video. We actually ended up with the same exact composition. This may actually be the same exact map that we started off with. Now, that was definitely not my intention going into this. The margins are definitely what matters. But to be honest with you, if Sununu decides not to run in New Hampshire, that is the only possible area I could see the Democratic Party making a pickup in 2020. Now, in 2019, we could see a loss in Louisiana or a gain in Mississippi or possibly a gain in Kentucky. There are a number of seats, but most of these are already characterized as safe. So it doesn't look too good for the Democratic Party. I'm sorry that this ended up being a really boring map. That was definitely not my intention. But yeah, so that wraps up this video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.